Hello. So today I want to talk about crushes. I'm going to tell you guys about two different crushes I've had in my life. These are the two major crushes I've ever had in my life. And they have, one of them is very sweet and the other is very bad. And I want to share these stories because I feel like they were both critical points in me developing my sense of identity and who I was as a lover, as a woman, though one of them took place during childhood. And because while they are embarrassing, they also, I think, reflect a level of humanity that needs to be displayed more often so that we can get through the shame and get to figuring out how to um, take better care of ourselves when we find ourselves beginning to care about others and don't exactly know what to do with all of those emotions, especially when we're young. So, I'm going to start with the first crush. Now, this isn't my very first crush, but this is the first crush that ever meant anything to me, and it lasted for a very long time. So, setting the scene, I was um, I was 8 years old. I was about 8 years old. So I was 8 years old and I had just moved to the United States of America. I had moved to Seattle, Washington with my mom and my sister. And I was there post divorce. So life was really changing. And I I wouldn't say I was one of those kids who like the divorce really had an effect on me. It was just kind of like, okay, and then everything was a blur, and then suddenly I was in the US. Um, and I started going to this school that was, to be honest, a completely iconic place to have your education. This school, which I won't name, and it was a very small school. It was majority black, which I had never experienced before growing up in Canada. It was a majority black school, like 99%, and it was a Catholic school. Um, and yeah, I was there. I was entering into the third grade, and there was this boy in my class um, who I thought was the cutest. I can't particularly remember when I started to like this person, when I started to have a little crush. Um, I just remember, though, that it lasted for years and that many people knew by the time I was becoming a teen or a tween, many people knew. And he might have even known. And to give more information, growing up, I was one of the girls that I was like a matchmaker for my friends. I loved love and I loved relationships. So I liked to hear about whatever they were going through and whatever they were feeling. But I didn't really get a lot of romantic experiences growing up. I had never had anybody tell me that they liked me except for this one specific experience, which I put it to the side. I had never had anybody tell me that they liked me, and I had never had any. If I had ever had any romantic experiences, I didn't notice because I had never known that anybody was attracted to me, never knew anybody liked me, nobody ever told me. I was never anybody in school who there was, like somebody has a crush on you, like that kind of thing going around. It never happened for me. And I particularly remember this being so prominent because I remember a phase in middle school where we had this tire and it became like the kissing tire on the school playground, and we would like match people and send people in to this tire. And I can't remember if we were matching people who were already like who already expressed like for each other or if it was random. I don't really remember how it all went, but I just remember I was never going into that tire and nobody was ever expecting, it didn't seem like anybody was ever expecting me to go into that tire. um, I just never had that kind of experience. I never had somebody tell me they liked me. I never had somebody kiss me, nothing like that. So I was a girl who was aware at a very young age that love might not be super easily accessible to me, and that having that kind of fun attraction and romantic experience was something I would be living out in my head for a while. I was aware of that, and I was right, because I didn't really end up having any experiences till university. But yeah, I had this crush on this boy, and he was super, super sweet, very kind, never mean to me, but we weren't very close at all. We only ever talked when we were in a group with other people. But what I liked about him, I think what I liked about him was that he was tall and cute and kind. You know, he never made me feel uncomfortable. He never made me feel judged. He never used me as a joke. And, you know, I would sometimes fall into the position of being the butt of the joke friend throughout growing up. Not all the time. Mostly as I got older, I ended up sometimes slipping into that position. But sometimes I would fall into that position. But he never did that to me. He was just always really kind. That was really the main thing, because I didn't really get to know him much, but he was never rude to anyone that I had seen, and he never talked about people. He was just a very chill kid. And I found that very alluring and attractive. And so I had a crush on him for like ages. And I remember that by the time I was in middle school, no longer in elementary, I think a lot of my friends and like just a lot of the girls just knew this. Um, and I remember going through phases where I would make fun of myself, and about this crush. And I remember I was at camp, at Camp Hamilton, and we were having like I don't know how long, maybe like a week-long sleepover there, my whole grade. And it was just like things that, it was just like part of like the ritual of being in middle school and like being in sixth grade at that time. And it was really fun. And I remember like lying and saying that I had touched his hair while he slept, while he was sleeping in one of the other doors. I don't know why I was telling this elaborate lie. I don't know why I did that. But I just remember saying that. And I think it was part of this stream of myself where I was making fun of myself, because I was probably insecure about the fact that I actually really did like this guy, and I kind of hoped he liked me back, but I didn't think anything would ever really happen with that. And I kind of knew that it would not be going anywhere, but there was a part of me that wanted it to. And so I started to make things a little more public and laugh at myself a little bit. And this was a phase of life where I was also just, yeah, I was also just becoming very obnoxious in certain ways. And so that's a standout moment that I remember thinking in my head, like, why am I telling this lie and why am I doing this? But a lot of that experience was defined by a peaceful form of unrequited love. I did not expect anything to come from that, and I don't think I loved him. But it was really nice to have feelings for somebody. And sometimes I felt like maybe there was something that he felt too, but I would have never known, and I don't know to this day, and I no longer have this crush, and it no longer means anything to me, besides a nostalgic feeling. But looking back, it's a crush that I'm very happy that I got to have, because it was sweet, it didn't cause a lot of drama, it taught me that I have good taste in guys, because he never ended up really being a guy who caused any trouble from what I know, and he was always pretty much very kind from throughout the time that I got to know him and up until high school. And I don't know what he's doing now, but I would imagine he's still pretty kind. He was always a sweet guy, and it let me know that I have good taste from a young age. So that was my first crush. Sweet, sweet, sweet time. Now this is my second crush. This crush comes on the heels of beginning university, really starting to grow up and being excited about growing up, and also not having a lot of boundaries, and really looking to have experiences. I think that for the most part, not having a lot of romantic experiences growing up was good for me. I think that I needed to focus on other things, develop other parts of myself. I can be a little bit obsessive, and I think I needed time to figure myself out before I got to have all these, whirlwind experiences, especially at a young age, and I'm such a dreamer. So I think for the most part, not having experiences growing up that were romantic was a good thing. But I do think that not having those romantic experiences did make me a little boy crazy. And I would have never said that at any other point before today, really. But thinking about making this video and thinking about this guy that I ended up having a crush on, I think I was a little boy crazy. And it wasn't about all these boys, it was just about one. But the way that I behaved was so outlandish and so without boundaries and without a lot of self-respect, that I can't understand it other than maybe it was because I just didn't get to have experiences growing up. And so this felt like my chance, and I just dumped years of longing and excitement and yearning and desire to be seen and to be attractive and to be noticed and to be wanted all onto this one person. And they became a vehicle for me for getting to experience relationships and life with the opposite sex, and just life under a romantic lens, which I had never gotten to have. So this crush began in the first year of university. It lasted about a year, I would say. Maybe it lasted like about a year. Would I say that? No, I wouldn't. I would say it lasted. Okay, this crush began in like January or February of 2019, and it ended, I would say, in like October of 2019. So however many months that is, that's how long this crush lasted. This was a very troubling period. I was living on campus in university, and I was living in these dorms, and I was a first year English major. This person was also an English major, and I was super excited. I was just super excited to embrace life and have life embrace me. I was excited to be an adult. I was 18. I was really excited because I had really developed in my self-confidence and in my self-expression. I was finding my style. I more often than not found myself to be pretty and found myself to be beautiful, which was not a super common experience up until then. And so that was exciting and new. And I found myself having this new burgeoning sexuality that I really wanted to explore and have explored. And so I feel like what happened is that I actually kind of just picked a person. And I picked a person who fit within the realms of what I thought was safe, and I just let it unfold from there. I cannot honestly tell you whether I really liked this person or not. I don't think it was about my feelings. I think, or at least I don't think it was about my feelings towards them. I think it was about what I wanted for myself. And I think it was about feeling at a loss, feeling behind, feeling like I was lacking, and not feeling behind in comparison to other people, but just feeling like I didn't have access to something that I wanted and feeling like I deserved to have access to that. And so trying to get it for myself. So I developed a crush on this person, and I made it known pretty quickly. I didn't really hold anything back. And I don't remember exactly how this started, but I just remember my friend group that I was hanging out a lot with at university during my first year. I feel like everybody was involved. Everyone knew. The moment I knew, it feels like everyone knew, because I can't remember having an individual experience of beginning this crush. It feels like it was an experience that happened in relation to other people, which I think also made it very, whatever, confusing and too much. So I remember texting this person one day, and I think I messaged this person while I was out with other people, or maybe I did it on my own and then I told my friends later. I don't remember. But I remember telling them that I liked them, that I thought they were cute, I think, and maybe asking them to go out or something like that. Either way, I expressed that I was attracted to this person. And I don't remember how long I had known this person at this point. We must have had a class together, which is why we ended up connecting, or maybe they lived in residence. So maybe it was that we lived together. I don't know. I don't know what was happening. I was, was I all the way there? I don't know. Probably not. I don't think so. Thinking back, I can't remember the memory. I can't remember the details very clearly. But I remember telling them that I liked them. And I remember telling my friends that I liked them, and that I told them that I liked them. And then I remember them responding and me sharing it with my friends and it being like a whole thing. We were all so excited, and I was so excited. It was so exciting to be bold and be a woman who, went out and got what she wanted, and not be afraid, and to not have insecurity block me and make me feel like I wasn't deserving. And I think in some sense there might have been an aspect of me feeling like I had something to prove to myself, about the fact that I could access this thing that had been cut off for me for so long and had only seemed to be accessible to my friends and never to me, because I had witnessed boys like girls around me all the time. I was always kind of being a bridge and being a median between two people who were connecting, and I was always carrying some type of message forward, and I was just always witnessing it and witnessing people like my friends and being like, oh my gosh, they like you, blah, 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 blah. So being so hyper aware that feelings were being had and the attraction was being expressed, and then having it be so non-existent in my own life, I think was harder than I probably allowed myself to feel. And though I did have my emo moments of teenagerhood, for the most part, I was focused on my career and I was focused on the dream person I had in my head. And I spent a lot of time daydreaming, and all of the time that I spent being melancholy was more about the feeling than actually feeling depressed about life. It was more about just feeling everything. As a teenager, I liked to feel. Looking back now and thinking about why I behaved the way I did, I think it was more of an artist's expression than me actually being all over the place with my emotions. So yeah, I think I had a little bit of something to prove to myself, and I don't want to say that I was desperate, but I think I was restless. I think I was really restless, and I didn't know where to direct my energy, and I wanted something to happen in my life. I was ready for things to be exciting, and I was ready to be a part of what they always talk about when they talk about being young, about the love and all of the new experiences, and the fact that things are crazy and the drama and you're getting to know yourself, and oh my gosh, I was ready for that to take place in my life. And if it wasn't going to happen naturally, I was fine with making it happen for myself. I didn't think I needed to wait on anything. And I felt like I had picked a pretty safe person because he seemed nice, and we were both English majors, and he wasn't mean to me. So yeah, and I did think he was cute. I did think he was really cute. I think that I dragged it a little bit in terms of expressing to my friends how much I liked him, because at that age I had a tendency to overdo things and to overact and overperform. And I don't know exactly where that comes from, though I think it might have something to do with feeling like my value in spaces, especially socially, comes from my ability to be entertaining and to be funny and to be someone that people like are looking at their other friend like and being like, she's crazy. Like, I think that I felt like that was who I was socially, and that was how I existed in spaces. And so that's what I needed to bring to the table. And I don't think I felt that way on the surface, but I think beneath it all, I think there was a part of me that felt like I needed to overperform and just be overly present, overly exciting, something for someone to watch and be entertained by. So yeah, I kind of overdid my emotions and wasn't completely honest about the reality of what I was really feeling when I was talking to my friends. So I was lying to myself, lying to my friends, and not being completely honest with myself about what my intentions were. And I was also just very stubborn because I wanted this crush to work out and to develop into something because I don't know. I think one, I was sick of waiting, and two, I felt like, well, I think I felt a little defensive of the fact that I had put myself out there and now so publicly, a little maybe embarrassed that this could go so, that this could not go anywhere or that it could go so badly, especially because pretty much none of my friends thought that this was something worth pursuing, did not see the attraction, and were kind of like, what is this? And so I think I felt defensive of my choices and of what I was into and what I was doing. And so a lot of things were happening that were adding on to my behavior within this crush, which I haven't even really spoken about. So yeah, anyways, I picked this guy. We go on this date to get pizza, and the date is fine. It's fun. I'm excited because I'm on a date. I'm having fun because it's my first date. Is it my first date? It might not be. It might be my second, because I think my first date was actually with a woman. But my queer experiences are very different from my experiences with men, and I'll talk about those another time. But yeah, so we go on this date, and looking back, I don't really remember the details of this date. I can remember that I definitely was putting in a lot more socially, and I was definitely a lot more into this experience than he was into it and into me. And I think it was probably him doing me more of a favor than him actually feeling anything. And that was probably something that was true from the very beginning. And that was something that I knew, but I also didn't understand completely. I knew logically somewhere within me at that age, in that moment, that he was not into me and that there was nothing here to pursue. But there was a bigger and stronger and louder and more stubborn and aggressive part of me that was like, that just refused to believe it and refused to engage with that reality. And I think it was due to many things. I think it was due to the fact that so many people were involved at that point, and ego and embarrassment and a sense of entitlement to love, and especially because I thought I had picked somebody where it was like, well, why not? And not understanding why he wouldn't be attracted to me. All these different things, I think, were coming into play when it comes to me not being willing to see the truth. But yeah, so we go on this date, and the date was fine. And we come back, and everybody's waiting in like the cafeteria. And I don't think they were waiting for us. I don't know. But we go into the cafeteria, and we're like, hey. And it's one of those moments where I had never gotten to have an experience where I come back from a date and like we come back together and my friends are there, and it was such an an interesting experience, and it was exciting, but it was also, I think, probably really nerve-wracking for me. And I don't know exactly what my mindset was walking through, I mean, living out the follow-up experience of that night and being with my friends, with him being there and him talking to my friends and all of that. But I think it was probably a lot of social pressure for me that I wasn't talking about, or acknowledging within myself. But yeah, I told my friends the date went well. I was, I probably overdid it with whatever I was saying, and he was nice. He was kind about it the first time, and things were fine. And then, yeah, my friends were like, "Ooh," all the things your friends do when you have a new experience with love. And yeah, we went home, and that was that. I don't remember exactly how the next date happened, or if we ever even had another date. What became clear to me, and what this entire situation is defined by, is my friends being like, he's not into you, and being very honest with me about that. Me being in complete denial and being in delusion and being super stubborn, and probably desperate. And then him being one of those people who was probably dealing with like people pleaser behavior at that time, and not being able to, like, he would set a boundary with me and then he wouldn't, and then he would string me along a little bit, maybe because he had nothing else to do, and then he would be kind of cold and cut it off. And I don't blame him for his part in whatever happened between us, because I was not listening. I was not listening. I never listened. I was ignoring everything, and I would only listen to when something positive would happen. And beyond that, I was in complete denial. So regardless of the ways that he was maybe an asshole with certain things that he did, I really don't think it compares to where I have to be accountable and responsible. There were so many times, I think, that he made it clear that he wasn't interested. I think he even said it. And there were times when he became cold and we weren't talking. And there are times where he would talk about crushes on other girls and attraction to other girls. And I would hear that, and it would make me upset, and it would make me feel hurt, and I would feel all these types of things that I have the right to feel in the privacy of my home, but in no space beyond that, because he owes me nothing, because we're not in any type of connection, and he's made that clear. And the only one that's confused about that is me. So yeah, after that date, things carry on strangely. It never builds into anything publicly ever. And I go to his apartment a few times, like within our residence, and I meet his friends and his best friend, which that was a strange experience. And yeah, like we have moments, there's moments where I wonder if something's happening, and then it's awkward and it's weird, and there's not lots of conversation that's easy and free flowing, and there's coldness, and there's other girls that he's talking about, and so it's clear that it's not working. And I will give myself the credit to say that I had moments where I would like wisen up and accept what was happening and move on. But the problem was that I could easily be pulled back into this dynamic. If he gave me any type of hint or any type of energy, I was there for it, and I was ready to get back in, and I was ready to be excited again. And it was a mess. And I think that my friend group, who was really brutally honest with me about the situation, I think really hated seeing me like that, really hated seeing me so desperate and without self-respect, and especially over a guy that I just think they didn't think was worth it at all. And that was hard, because this was my first time, ever having any type of romantic anything with anyone. And so I didn't know what I was doing, and it was super vulnerable. And I had gotten way too many people involved so quickly because I was so excited, and I was so extroverted during this time period in my life. I just loved like connecting with people, and I was willing to connect with anyone, and I was willing to tell a lot of people whatever about my life because I was just sharing, and trying to connect. And it wasn't something I was putting on. I really was that way. I liked talking to people, but I just didn't have any boundaries. But yeah, it was starting to create rifts in my friendships with the friend group that I had that I would later fall out with, because while I was a mess and I did need to listen to the truth, I felt like they were kind of mean about, you know, what was happening, and made me feel embarrassed and judged rather than having the empathy to understand that I'm young and stupid and I might need a softer hand. And this is where my best friend, Trudy, she saves my life constantly, but she saved my life because she was so patient with me, and she would listen to me make my little pros and cons list about a guy who was not even thinking about me. And she would talk with me about it, and she would be gracious and listen to all of the examples and the evidence that I had. And she would listen when I was hurt, and she would be there for me. And she was empathetic and she was compassionate, despite it being so clear that I was being irresponsible with my own emotions and following no boundaries and not respecting him and his boundaries and not respecting myself. She didn't ever make me feel judged. She never made me feel embarrassed. She never enabled me. She was always honest with me, but she was supportive. And this time period in my life was really important. I don't know why I'm getting emotional, but this time period in my life was really important for helping me identify the people who I'm safe to be around when I am a mess and when I am embarrassing myself and when there's strong potential for me to be humiliated. You know, who is safe? Who of my friends are safe to be not all together and, you know, super self-respecting around, and who do I need to have it more together to be around, or else I will feel unsafe. That situation really revealed a lot to me, and I remember particularly one time when I was coming back from hanging out with this guy, and this was not a date. At this point, we hadn't gone any more dates since that first date, at least from my memory. This was just us hanging out as friends, because we did have moments where we could be really great friends. And when we had those moments, it was really nice. And I had moments where I could do that and separate things. And while I would sometimes think about a little thing, I was able to separate them in my mind. And so I remember this was a situation where we were just hanging out as friends. And I think, and we were coming back from whatever, and it was nighttime, and we got on the bus, and my friends from this friend group happened to be on the bus. And I just remember walking down like the little bus aisle to the back of the bus where they were, and their like facial expressions, and I remember them being like, "What are you doing?" And I think one of them might even have said that, and he was right there. And there was also with them this girl that I didn't know. And it was just like, I felt so embarrassed. And by then we were in second year. I felt so embarrassed. And I also just felt like I would never do that to my own friend. I would never, first of all, publicly try and address something that's happening that really we should talk about in private, especially if it's something where it's embarrassing, or it's something where they need to be, we need to discuss a confidence issue. I would never make it clear publicly that, you know, you should be ashamed of yourself. And I would never do that in front of the guy, and I would never do that in front of another person, like a stranger that they don't know. But they were just, that bus ride was so horrible because they were so mean and obvious about the fact that they thought I was being so stupid. And I don't know if they even remember that moment, but it was one of those moments that stuck in my mind and kind of went into my like little evidence box of why this relationship would not work. Not with this crush that I was beginning to slowly move away from, but from that friendship. I didn't realize when I began to tell this story how intertwined this would be with friendships and a discussion on crushes and friendships. But yeah, because this crush was the first time I was ever doing anything that was just so publicly embarrassing and just being so humiliating. I had no self-respect, and I had no family around. Also, my family was in town, but I wasn't like hanging out with them all the time and talking to them, my sisters. I was not telling them everything that was going on. So there was nobody who really, really knew me, who could be there to take care of me. I was alone, and then I had my friends. And it was the first time where I was in a position like that, because growing up, I was always somebody who, I always was able to kind of keep it together. I never really had like moments, that were like where I was acting out or where I was being dramatic or embarrassing or anything. I kind of always had it together. I think I always was kind of just like a solid unit. And so it was very distressing, and I think probably a little strange for me to witness myself be so erratic, and then to not have anyone that I was safe around, like my family, my sisters who know me, who could protect me and help me. And I was really relying on the friendships that I was developing at that time, and then relying on myself, and not being vulnerable with my family, so they didn't really understand what was going on. And it was such a crucial time for, I think, my friends to show up in a way where they were just kind and held a lot of space and gave a lot of grace. And that didn't happen with certain friends. And it went into a file in my mind. And part of this entire crush, part of it is really defined by what was happening with my friends and the way they were reacting to it, and the way I was treated about it, and the shame that I felt because of their reaction to me and my embarrassment. And I'll say that I've witnessed, my friends do things that I've been like, ah, but I would not ever make somebody feel publicly ashamed or embarrassed of themselves, somebody that I love, because that's not how you protect your people. And it was a really important moment for me to clarify what it means, how I want to be treated by my friends, how I want to feel safe, and how I want them to show up for me when I'm maybe not showing up for myself, how I want them to take care of me, and, boundaries when it comes to how they make me feel. My friend Dridi has never made me feel ashamed and never made me feel self-conscious. And I've experienced those emotions around her, but that's because of something that's going on within me. She's never brought that on, and like twisted the knife. And there was a lot of twisting of the knife during that moment in my life, which I guess ended up having more of an impact on me than the actual crush and all of the shit that went down with him. Probably because he doesn't actually matter in this story. He was just a vehicle for learning all these lessons. But yeah, that was a huge takeaway. And I ended up maintaining that friendship for like 2 more years after it, but it added to a longer story of feeling like I don't belong, and feeling shame and weird and strange within that friend group dynamic. And it was a feeling I couldn't explain for a very long time until I was able to, and eventually ended up ending that friendship. But yeah, anyways, I was supposed to be talking about this crush. Yeah, I got a lot of signals. I got a lot of red flags. I ignored a lot of them. I also had moments that were fun and that were exciting. Like it was Pride once. I remember Pride. I was out with my friends for Pride, and we end up running into the guy with his friends from his town. And I, and I remember just being, I was such a gabber. I remember just gabbing on with his friends, like I knew them, and talking to them and just sparkling. I just remember feeling like I was a dazzling, sparkling, like little firecracker. I felt so energized. I felt so fabulous, and so like, I felt like I was in Sex and the City. Like I just felt so cool and fabulous in that moment, and not because of him, but just because of the energy. It was just Pride, and I was just happy and young, and I was probably drunk, and there's just so many fun things happening at that moment, and I felt so alive. And that was a moment, it was moments like that that I would end up holding on to and telling myself and building up this narrative that no, there's something happening here, it's just not clear cut, you know. I guess it would end up evolving into what somebody would call a situationship, except it's not, because there's no ship, there's no relationship. It was just a situation in my mind, that I was creating and making bigger and bigger than it needed to be. But I remember there would be good moments like that. Then there would be bad moments where, like, his best friend, I really didn't like her, and she was just she was rude, and judgy and mean. And I think I remember her, I think, getting involved in whatever was happening between me and him, like several times. And I don't remember what she did. I think there might have been a few times she said that he didn't like me, or she was like being a communicator between, like, from him to me, or from him to one of my friends to me. And it was always so like, why is she here and why is she talking? I really didn't like having her involved, and that whole aspect added a whole other twisted energy to it. There's a lot of just unnecessary drama and all these extra voices, which was my fault, because I decided to bring it into like a community type of love relationship where somehow everybody was involved. I don't know why I did that. I think it's part of the performance thing that I was going through, where I needed to entertain. So somehow I needed my life to be available and accessible for other people. I don't know. I haven't analyzed my behavior around that situation enough to give you a clear answer, but that's what I can maybe say is what was going on during that time. Then over the summer, we like never spoke and never had any interaction because he went back to his town and I was living life. So yeah, I kind of moved on. And then second semester of university started, and I had kind of moved on, but we ended up having a few classes together. And I was getting to a space where I was like, we can be friends, and this doesn't need to be a crush anymore, and this doesn't need to be anything because there's nothing going on here. And so yeah, we would have moments where we would hang out, and I think what I noticed is that I think that once he realized that I was starting to move on, I don't know if there was a part of him that wanted to keep me hanging on or whatever, but there was a little bit of like playing with my emotions a little bit, just to see whether he could have me hanging on. Because I think that, I am quite the obsessive person, or I was quite the obsessive person at that time. And so I think it was very entertaining if you got to be on the receiving end of my infatuation. I think it's entertaining, and I think you feel good about yourself, because I will really, make you feel like a star. And so I think there was probably a little bit of ego in missing that made him do certain things that he shouldn't have done, and lead me on certain ways and kind of try and pick up back those feelings from the semester before, to not create something because he wasn't committed enough to actually like express any type of emotions, but just leave a little something there to have me thinking about and wondering about, which I will say was torturous, because at that time I really, everything meant something because I hadn't experienced anything. So having those moments was not helpful in terms of me trying to create some distance and begin to separate myself and grow up and move on. I will say, at the same time that I was developing this crush, I was having this thing going on at work. I was working at McDonald's, and I was having this thing go on at work with this guy who I would eventually have an experience, which I'll talk about another time. But so I was getting a little bit of experience with flirting in that aspect, and I lived in New York, so guys there are very open and very they speak to you. So when I was living in New York, I had experiences all the time where guys would be like, but that was different because those were grown men and I was a teenager who was like, and none of that was being processed. But anyways, all of that is to say that it was never like I had never had anybody be like, hey mama, I had, but it had been black men. And this was a white guy, which was very different. And it's not like I'm particularly attracted to any specific thing. I don't have a type. But it's different because I don't know if it's like, if the data is there that you're catcalled mostly by your own people, or like you're engaged mostly by your own people. But I've always grown up, or when I was in the States, I grew up in predominantly black neighborhoods. And so I've had most of my interactions, my social interactions that were like significant, were usually with other black people. And there were certain experiences that I just counted and wrote off as just like, that they were separate from it being about me. And it was more so about the different things that connected us, because of whether it was just like time and place and just the convenience of me just being a woman in a space, and so someone's going to say something, and us being black, so if we're the only two black people in the space, and maybe we connect and blah blah blah. But I never felt like there was anything true. It always felt shallow, and it always just felt like just a random conquest. And so those experiences were never processed as anything real. And I was never able to identify them as anything real, because it was never like I was wined and dined. It was just little one-liners, or staring, or looking, or yelling across, like, so you know what I mean? It never meant anything. And they all were in that, side space. I hope I'm explaining that well. It's kind of a unique experience that I feel like you would understand within whatever your own niche is. But yeah, so I'd had like flirty experiences like that, but this was so different because, one, I was the one taking control and saying I liked somebody. And it was different because romance, rather than just like lust, was the main topic, and romance had never been the main topic for me. I never gotten the chance for that to be the main topic, so it was different. And then him being white, I think, just complicated things, because I think in terms of me being annoyed about his behavior, I think it made it a little worse. I think it twisted the knife a little bit, because it was just like, when he was disrespecting me, it felt loaded. And I'm not saying that he was being loaded. It felt loaded, because it just felt like I was disrespecting myself on so many more levels. And that's just, you got to chop it up to history. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. But I don't think he was doing that. But I just felt like I was able, it felt like it was easier to treat me in such a dismissive and rude and mean kind of way. Sometimes with the way that he would behave towards me, um, maybe it was easier to do that because I was a black girl. I don't know. I don't know. And it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like, I knew what I knew and I didn't listen when I didn't listen. And that's what matters because I'm an autonomous person. But yeah, so second semester comes around, we have classes together, we're mostly friends, but but there was this one time, and I don't remember the context of this and why I would say yes and why he asked, but we were hanging out a lot. And mostly as friends, I think, in my mind, and sometimes there would be an underlying energy, but I think I was getting to the point where I was learning that the underlying energy means nothing because it's never followed through with anything. So I would notice it, but I think I was beginning to recognize that it was probably more of a game than anything serious. But we were hanging out a lot because of classes, I think. And I don't know what else. Because we got along as friends. Yeah, because we got along as friends. And one time he texts me and asks me if he can come over or if he can sleep over. I don't remember, but he ends up staying over. But I don't know if he slept over a night. Yeah, I think he did. He ends up sleeping over and nothing happens. Nothing happened. But he just slept over in my bed. And I don't remember why. And I don't remember what we were doing. I don't remember. But I just remember in the morning, we woke up and like he was going home. And on my like door, he kissed me. Like on the front door of my apartment little building, he kissed me. And I remember being so, it was just like a little peck. It wasn't like it was just a little peck. But yeah, he kissed me and then he like was like, okay, bye. Like, and he walked home. And I don't remember exactly how I felt in that moment. I think I probably felt excited. And I think I also probably felt confused. And now, like, what's happening? And I think the biggest thing I remember about that is that it didn't go anywhere. And it just was another one of those things where it was like, oh, looking back now, it might have just been like a leading on tactic, or he might have just been bored, or he might have just wanted to see if anything was there. He was also very indecisive, which didn't help the situation because I think he would go back and forth between being like, can I give this a shot? Do I want to give this a shot? And then he would decide he didn't. And then he would wonder again, and then he would decide he didn't. He would always decide he didn't. But I think he would contemplate it a lot or consider it a lot, which thinking the defensive part of myself over myself is like, oh. But I mean, that's fair. You're young and anyways, so yeah, that led to nothing. And I remember the thing though that ended up being that was too much and like pissed me off to a land where he could never come back was, I remember we had this one class where it was me, him, and my other friend, who I introduced him to. He didn't know on his own. And he thought she was super cute, and she is super cute. And so I remember him, first of all, I already felt like he was treating me like I didn't exist whenever she was around, or just treating me like, shut up, let me talk to this girl. And even though I wasn't, it's not like I was like, blah, 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 because I was starting to gain some self-respect back. So I was beginning to just see him as a friend, but then he was beginning to be, but when somebody has one version of you stuck in their mind, which is fair enough because it was the version of me that was probably made the strongest impression. The obsessive crazy girl who has a crush on me. But I was moving more so into like the friend, and we had hung out so much as friends, and I had let so much slide and had become a friend that the way he was disrespectful and dismissive whenever he was interested in talking to my friend, who was also in our class together, we're all in English. It was crazy. And I just remember one time we were like studying or waiting for class to begin, or maybe waiting for class to end. I don't know. Not waiting for class to end because we weren't in class, waiting for class to begin or doing something. We weren't in the classroom. It was just me and him. And I remember him talking to me about her, or just doing something that was, it was like it was too much. I think he was both talking about her, and obviously in a way where it's like he's interested in her, but not ever really, I don't think, plainly saying that. But I think whatever he was saying, it was obvious. But then I think in the same breath, he had done something that like was almost trying to be flirty or carry on something between us. And it was just so, I think it like flipped a switch on in my brain that was that ignited like all the anger within me and the frustration being like toyed with and played around with, that it's like I snapped. And I don't think I yelled at him, but I think I was pretty cold and like blunt. And I don't remember what I said. I don't even remember what happened. But I just remember that kind of being a strict cutoff point, and we never hung out again. And even though we had class together, I think I became pretty cold. I was never really interested in anything again because it was too much. It was like, now you're really playing with me. And to witness yourself be disrespected when you're coming back into awareness, and so then watching this person feel so comfortable being so disrespectful, and realizing that must be because you've allowed so much disrespect when you were like not awake, not aware. It can be debilitating. It's such a horrible thing to experience, especially if you care about yourself and you don't want that for yourself. And I think it was one of those moments where I was just like, how dare you? How dare you think you can do this to me? And I just became like crazy cold and super done with the situation. And nothing happened from that point on. Our friendship ended, and I never looked back. And I was on to the next. And it was I'm so relieved that wrapped up and only went as far as it did, and that nothing ever happened physically beyond that little peck. And that everything was mostly emotional, because I think it would have been really traumatizing if I had put myself in a position where I was physical and then had also been being disrespected and toyed with and disrespecting myself in that way. That would have been too much. And I don't think he's the type of guy that would do that, but I don't know, because I don't really understand the kiss. And I don't particularly think he has great character, but I don't think he's a horrible person. But I think that crush, compared to my childhood crush, really showed the difference in where my taste goes when I am feeling too desperate and too in need of something to fill me up, rather than being able to find something within myself. Like when I was a kid, I wasn't desperate for love. I liked love. I loved dreaming about love. I was a dreamy, hopeless romantic, but I wasn't desperate for anything. And so I never was, becoming attached to boys and, developing crazy things and going through things, because I was solid within myself, and I had a lot of interests, and I was doing things. And I had a lot of interest and was doing things by the time I was 18, but I wasn't so solid within myself anymore. Growing up takes its toll. And I did, I think, put a level of importance around relationships and being connected to somebody else that was too much. That was way too much, and I got way in over my head, and ended up hurting myself because of it. And when I'm in that position where I see love as something that is going to answer a problem for me, or like bring in a part of myself that doesn't exist or something like that, fill some type of hole, I make horrible decisions and I have horrible taste. And that situation was a true reflection of that. And I would go through another situation where I would go through a few situations after that that were all following the same pattern of me. One, I don't know what the word is, like dramatizing my feelings to myself, lying to myself about how much I actually felt for somebody, and making it more than it was. And I don't know why I would lie to myself about that, but I did. I would do that several times more. And just being so interested in relationships and in connection with people and in intimacy and love and sex and all these things that I would just pick people rather than actually figuring out who I liked and waiting on that type of experience, because it's really rare that I like somebody, which I'll also say I haven't really liked anyone. The only people that I've ever really liked, the only person that I've ever really liked romantically has been that crush from childhood. And that was, a very baby, like, not like I wasn't in love with him, but that was a genuine, I really liked him. Since then, I don't think I could honestly say that I've ever, I'm trying to think, that's why I'm not rushing. I've had attraction, but I could never say that I've actually really been like, oh, I really like this person about anybody else since then. No, there's never been anyone else. And I've been in multiple situations, so that's a problem, because I would lie to myself and tell myself that I do. And even when it was clear that I didn't, I would ignore that feeling. And I continued to do that, I would say 3 more times, with 3 different guys, until I stopped. And then I would do that once more with one woman, and then I stopped. And now I've been on this celibate journey, just working on myself. But it took a roller coaster, and it required a lot of sacrifice of self-love and of boundaries and of self-respect. And I think that it might have been something that I just had to go through because I needed to learn certain things about myself and about the way I behave, and learn about the type of person I don't want to be in relationships, and in the process of trying to find relationships. But it's hard to look back on and remember the way that I completely disregarded myself. And it's something that I want to make sure I instill within my daughters and my sons and my kids, just in general, however they are. I want to instill in them a sense of confidence, because I don't think it's something you have to go through. I think it's something I went through because there were just certain things I didn't have, certain tools I didn't have. But I think that with more conversation and more honesty and more examples and more, I don't know, I'm hoping that I can help my kids avoid certain mistakes, because some of them are just humiliating. And if you don't have to go through it, don't go through it. And yeah, I think I have other things I want to say, but I think I'll save that for another time. So those are stories of 2 crushes. One is pretty short and sweet and really reflects the pureness of my childhood heart, when I also really knew myself. Obviously, I didn't know all of myself, but I knew myself. And even towards the end, when I was being crazy and over dramatizing things and lying, it still was pretty pure. And in my mind, that crush lives in my mind as a pretty pure experience that I'm happy I had. And even though it went nowhere, I'm happy I had. I think it's sweet. And then the other's a traumatizing experience that I wince at, and that I wish, there's so many things I wish I would have done differently. There's so many embarrassing things. There's so many things that revealed itself because of it in other friendships. Um, and it's a hard thing to remember and to know that is a part of my story. But it was important, and it defined what would be a long period of my life in terms of dating and relationships and bad decisions I would make, from basically the ages of 19, like late 18 to like 20. Yeah, to like 20. So 2 years of just a lot of experiences, but it's okay. We survive, we prevail. So I'm just so glad to be out of it. But I wanted to share those with you guys because, I've been there, and you have nothing to be. I know that I'm saying that it's humiliating and embarrassing and, the shame, but there's really nothing to be ashamed of. It's completely normal. It's human nature. It's the human experience for some people. And that's just life. And you get through it. And one thing, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And that really applies when it comes to dating and things like that, as long as you let the lesson sink in. And I didn't let that lesson sink in at first because I would go on to make many, many mistakes with many other guys. But, well, not many, with 3 other guys, but that's still a significant number. It's 3 different people. But the lesson hit eventually, and when it was ready to, I let it. And I think that that's an important thing to know. You can't be in denial forever. And when you're ready for the truth, just let it happen. And it's going to be hard to think about all the things you did. And you're going to want to kick yourself. And then you're going to want to cry. And then you're going to want to hold yourself. And all of that is okay. It's just life. And either way, you should be proud of yourself for being so courageous enough to be vulnerable and to have emotional experiences and to try and open up your heart to connect with people. No matter how shitty it ends up going, it's okay. At least you were brave and bold enough to take the risk and to express yourself, and express an openness for life, regardless of whether you would fail or not. So, yeah, that is it. I think I am done talking now, and I'm happy I shared this with you guys on this series, and yeah, okay, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.